Before we dive into today's story, make sure to drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now, let's take you back to a moment that would become legendary in Chicago's sports history. A day when the greatest basketball player of all time showed that his prowess extended far beyond the hardwood. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in downtown Chicago, 1997, at the height of the Bulls' second three-peat era. The sidewalks were bustling with fans sporting their cherished red and black jerseys, all heading to what promised to be another electrifying game at the United Center. But among the sea of authentic Bulls merchandise, something caught the eye of one particular observer, something that most people would have missed, but not Michael Jordan. The story we're about to share isn't just about a superstar catching a counterfeiter in the act. It's about dignity, respect, and the unexpected ways justice can be served. What happened next would become a testament to Jordan's character off the court, proving that true greatness isn't just about scoring points or winning championships. It's about standing up for what's right, even when no one expects you to. On that fateful day, a street vendor had set up shop just 3 blocks from the United Center, his table loaded with what appeared to be authentic Chicago Bulls jerseys. The prices were suspiciously low, and the quality, well, that's where our story really begins. The vendor, a middle-aged man with a confident swagger, was busy convincing unsuspecting fans that they were getting the deal of a lifetime. Get your authentic Bulls jerseys here, straight from the official manufacturer. His voice carried across the street, drawing in curious onlookers and basketball enthusiasts alike. Special price today, folks. Get your number 23 jersey, just like the ones MJ wears on the court. What the vendor didn't realize was that fate had a peculiar sense of humor that day. As he continued his sales pitch, a tall figure in an impeccably tailored suit was observing from across the street. The man wasn't just any casual observer, it was Michael Jordan himself on his way to the arena for his pre-game routine. Jordan had always taken pride in how his brand represented not just himself, but the integrity of the game he loved. Each officially licensed piece of merchandise helped support the league, the teams, and ultimately, the fans who deserved authentic products for their hard-earned money. But what he was witnessing wasn't just about business. It was personal. The vendor was in the middle of his most convincing sales pitch yet, holding up a jersey to a young fan and his father. "Look at this stitching, sir. Exactly like the ones they sell inside the arena, but at half the price. Your boy can wear the same jersey as his hero, and you'll have enough left over for hot dogs and drinks at the game." The father, clearly tempted by the deal, was reaching for his wallet when Jordan decided it was time to step in. But this wouldn't be a confrontation filled with anger or accusations. No, Michael Jordan had learned long ago that the most powerful messages often came through actions rather than words. As the vendor continued his pitch, unaware of who was approaching, the crowd around his table grew larger. Some people started whispering, their eyes widening as they recognized the unmistakable figure moving toward them. The vendor, caught up in his sales momentum, remained oblivious to the shifting atmosphere around him. Jordan's presence was magnetic, drawing curious glances from passers-by who did double takes as they realized who was standing among them. But his focus remained solely on the situation unfolding before him. He had seen countless counterfeit operations during his career, but there was something about this particular moment. Perhaps it was the young fan's eager face, or the father's honest desire to make his son happy, that compelled him to intervene. The air grew thick with anticipation as Jordan moved closer to the vendor's table. The whispers in the crowd grew louder, and finally, the vendor looked up from his transaction. His practiced sales pitch died in his throat as he found himself face to face with the very legend whose name he had been invoking to sell his counterfeit merchandise. But what happened next would surprise everyone present. There would be no security called, no harsh words exchanged. Instead, Michael Jordan was about to teach a lesson in integrity that would resonate far beyond that street corner in Chicago. The vendor's confident demeanor began to crack, his hands trembling slightly as he held the fake jersey. The young fan and his father stood frozen, caught between excitement at seeing their hero and embarrassment at being caught in the middle of an illegal transaction. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see how the greatest player in basketball history would handle this delicate situation. Little did anyone know that this moment would become more than just an anecdote about catching a counterfeiter. It would transform into a story about redemption, second chances, and the power of handling confrontation with grace and wisdom. The lessons learned on that street corner would echo through the years, shared countless times by those who witnessed it and those who would later hear about it. As Jordan stood there, his presence commanding attention without saying a word, he was about to demonstrate why he was not just a basketball legend, but a master of human interaction. The next few moments would prove that sometimes the most powerful messages don't need a slam dunk to make their point. Sometimes they just need the right person at the right moment, choosing to handle a situation with dignity and understanding. The vendor's world was about to change, but not in the way anyone expected. This wasn't going to be a story of public humiliation or harsh consequences. Instead, it would become a tale of transformation, teaching everyone present that day, and now you, our viewers, about the true meaning of leadership and the power of giving people a chance to make things right. Stay tuned as we unravel how Michael Jordan turned what could have been an ugly confrontation into a moment of teaching and growth. Sometimes the greatest victories happen far from the basketball court, in the unexpected moments where character reveals itself in the most surprising ways. But before we continue with this incredible story, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next in this unforgettable encounter between the greatest basketball player of all time and the vendor who never saw him coming. The United Center stood majestically against the Chicago skyline, its massive structure casting long shadows across the surrounding streets as the late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. The air was electric, with the kind of anticipation that only game day could bring. But today's events would prove to be memorable for reasons that had nothing to do with what happened on the court. Michael Jordan's routine on game days was legendary, almost mythical in its precision. He would arrive hours before tip-off, his mind already locked into the zone that had made him the greatest player in basketball history. But on this particular day, something pulled him out of that laser-focused mindset. A disturbance in the familiar rhythm of pre-game preparations that he couldn't ignore. The street vendor had chosen his location strategically, positioned where the flow of foot traffic was heaviest, but just far enough from the official merchandise stores to avoid immediate detection. His portable table was arranged with military precision, displaying jerseys that, to the untrained eye, looked impressively authentic. The red and black colors of the Bulls' jerseys seemed to shimmer under the autumn sun, drawing in curious fans like moths to a flame. What made this scene particularly interesting was the vendor's attention to detail. He wasn't just another street hustler with obvious knockoffs. His operation showed a sophisticated understanding of what made the real jerseys special. The stitching, while not quite perfect, was close enough to fool most casual observers. The fabric had a similar weight and feel to the authentic jerseys, and he had even managed to replicate the holographic tags that were supposed to guarantee authenticity. Jordan, standing at a distance, could appreciate the craftsmanship even while disapproving of the deception. His own journey from North Carolina to NBA superstardom had taught him the value of authenticity, both on and off the court. He watched as the vendor worked the crowd, noting how the man's sales pitch was tailored to each potential customer, a skill that in another context might have been admirable. The scene around the vendor's table was a microcosm of Chicago basketball culture. Young kids pulled at their parents' sleeves, pointing excitedly at the jerseys. College students counted out their limited funds, trying to decide if they could afford what they thought was an incredible deal. Season ticket holders walked past, some shaking their heads knowingly at the obvious scheme, others pausing to consider whether they too might be tempted by the significantly lower prices. What made the moment even more poignant was the genuine excitement of the fans. Their love for the game, for the Bulls, and especially for Michael Jordan himself was palpable. They weren't looking to support counterfeit operations. They simply wanted to feel connected to something greater than themselves, to wear their passion literally on their backs. The vendor was exploiting this pure enthusiasm, turning their devotion into profit through deception. The autumn wind carried snippets of conversation through the crowd. Debates about the upcoming game mixed with haggling over prices. The vendor's voice rose above the general chatter, his practiced pitch becoming more confident with each successful sale. He had mastered the art of creating urgency, telling potential customers that these jerseys were special stock that wouldn't last long. Jordan observed how the vendor handled objections with the skill of a seasoned salesman. When someone questioned the low price, he had a ready explanation about bulk purchases and direct connections to suppliers. When asked about the quality, he would point out specific details that made his counterfeits look legitimate. It was a masterclass in persuasion, albeit one built on a foundation of lies. The energy around the vendor's table began to shift as Jordan moved closer. Even those who hadn't noticed him yet could sense something changing in the atmosphere. It was like the quiet before a storm, that moment when the air becomes heavy with potential energy. The vendor, still focused on his sales, remained unaware of the approaching legend, but others in the crowd began to nudge each other, pointing discreetly. What made this moment particularly significant was the contrast between the vendor's manufactured authenticity and Jordan's genuine presence. Here was a man who had built his legacy on being real, on pushing himself to authentic greatness rather than taking shortcuts. The irony of him witnessing someone profiting from fake versions of his own jersey was not lost on those who recognized him in the crowd. The scene took on an almost theatrical quality. The vendor, center stage, continued his performance to an increasingly distracted audience. Jordan, moving with the natural grace that characterized everything he did, approached like a principal actor making his entrance. The crowd of fans became both audience and extras in this unfolding drama, their reactions adding layers of tension to the moment. The weather seemed to participate in setting the stage, with clouds occasionally passing over the sun, creating dramatic shifts in lighting. The temperature had that perfect crispness that characterized Chicago autumn days, making everyone feel more alert, more aware of the significance of what they were witnessing. Even the distant sound of traffic seemed to fade into a respectful murmur, as if the city itself was holding its breath. What made Jordan's approach particularly masterful was his complete lack of aggression or confrontation. He moved with the same controlled power that characterized his play on the court, but there was nothing threatening about his presence. Instead, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew they didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The vendor's table, with its carefully arranged display of counterfeit merchandise, stood as a symbol of the shortcuts and deceptions that Jordan had spent his entire career fighting against. Each fake jersey represented not just a violation of trademark law, but a diminishment of the standards of excellence that Jordan had worked so hard to establish. The crowd's reaction continued to evolve as more people recognized Jordan. Parents whispered to their children, pointing discreetly. Phones began to appear as people tried to capture this unexpected moment. But what was most remarkable was how the atmosphere remained calm, controlled, much like Jordan himself. There was no rush to mob him, no sudden chaos. Instead, there was a growing sense of anticipation, as if everyone present understood they were about to witness something special. Jordan's presence seemed to elevate the moment beyond a simple case of counterfeit merchandise. This was about to become a lesson in integrity, in handling confrontation with grace, and in the power of authentic leadership. The vendor, still unaware, continued his sales pitch, each word now laden with dramatic irony as he invoked Jordan's name to sell fake versions of his jersey. The scene had all the elements of a classic moral tale. The deceiver about to be confronted by the very person they were imitating, the crowd of witnesses ready to learn from whatever happened next, and the protagonist approaching with wisdom rather than anger. But what made this situation truly unique was how Jordan would handle it, turning what could have been a moment of public humiliation into something far more meaningful. As Jordan drew closer to the table, the subtle details of the counterfeit operation became even more apparent to his experienced eye. He could see the slight imperfections in the stitching, the minor variations in the shade of red, the small but telling signs that separated these jerseys from the authentic ones he wore on court. But rather than anger, these observations seemed to fuel his determination to handle this situation in a way that would leave a lasting impact. The vendor's world was about to change, but not in the way anyone expected. The next few moments would demonstrate why Michael Jordan was not just a basketball legend, but a master of human interaction. As he prepared to make his presence known, the stage was set for a lesson that would extend far beyond the confines of this Chicago street corner. With each step closer to the vendor's table, Jordan carried with him not just his personal authority as a basketball icon, but the weight of every value he represented: excellence, authenticity, and the unwavering pursuit of doing things the right way. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting to see how this encounter would unfold, knowing they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years to come. The vendor's voice carried across the gathering crowd with practiced confidence, each word now taking on new meaning as Michael Jordan stood within earshot. Ladies and gentlemen, these aren't just any jerseys. These are exact replicas of what the GOAT himself wears on the court. You won't find better quality anywhere else, I guarantee it. The irony of the moment was palpable. Here was a man unknowingly making claims about authenticity to the very person he was counterfeiting. The vendor continued his sales pitch, his voice rising with enthusiasm as he held up a red number 23 jersey. Look at this stitching, folks. This is the exact same quality MJ wears when he's dropping 40 points at the United Center. Why pay those crazy arena prices when you can get the same thing right here? Jordan's expression remained neutral as he listened to the vendor's claims, each one more outlandish than the last. The basketball legend had heard countless people invoke his name over the years, but there was something particularly bold about using it to sell counterfeit merchandise just blocks from where he had created so many historic moments. You see this logo right here? The vendor pointed to the Bulls emblem on one of the jerseys. This is the official design. I've got a cousin who works at the factory where they make these. That's how I can offer them at such a great price. You're getting the real deal, just without all the markup. The crowd's reaction was beginning to shift as more people recognized Jordan's presence. Some stepped back, creating a natural space around him, while others watched with growing anticipation. The vendor, however, remained oblivious to the changing dynamics, too caught up in his own performance to notice the legendary figure standing just feet away. Now I know what some of you might be thinking, the vendor continued, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. You're wondering if these are authentic. Let me tell you something. I've been in this business for years. I know Michael Jordan's jersey better than anyone. Every stitch, every detail, it's all perfect. At this claim, a few knowing chuckles rippled through the crowd. Jordan's lip twitched slightly, the only visible reaction to the vendor's increasingly audacious statements. The vendor, interpreting the crowd's response as engagement, doubled down on his pitch. You think Michael Jordan would wear anything less than perfect? No way. And these jerseys right here, he held up another counterfeit. These are exactly what he wears. I'm talking identical. The man himself wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The dramatic irony of the moment was almost theatrical. Every person who recognized Jordan in the crowd understood they were watching something extraordinary unfold. The vendor's claims grew more elaborate with each passing moment, digging himself deeper into a hole he didn't yet realize existed. Let me tell you something about Michael Jordan, the vendor declared, warming to his theme. He's all about excellence, right? Well, so am I. That's why I only deal in the highest quality merchandise. These jerseys are so good if MJ walked by, right? Now he'd probably want to buy one himself. This statement drew more stifled laughter from the knowing crowd, but the vendor misinterpreted their reaction as appreciation for his joke. He was riding high on his perceived success, unaware that each word was being heard by the very legend he was invoking. Jordan's presence had always carried a certain gravity both on and off the court. Now, as he stood silently observing the scene, that same intensity filled the space around him. He wasn't just watching a counterfeit operation. He was witnessing someone unknowingly challenge everything he had built his career and reputation upon. You know what sets these jerseys apart? The vendor continued, picking up yet another counterfeit. It's the attention to detail. See this stitching here? This is exactly how Jordan likes his jerseys made. I know because I've studied every aspect of the authentic ones. Nothing gets past me. The crowd's energy continued to shift as more people recognized the basketball icon in their midst. Some were recording the scene on their phones, while others watched with a mixture of embarrassment and fascination. The vendor, still riding the wave of his own conviction, remained remarkably unaware of the changing atmosphere. Now, some people might try to tell you these aren't official merchandise, the vendor said, his voice taking on a defensive tone. But let me ask you something. Do you think I'd risk my reputation selling anything less than the best? These jerseys are so authentic, I bet Michael Jordan himself would approve. This latest claim caused Jordan to raise an eyebrow, the subtle gesture speaking volumes to those who caught it. The vendor had unknowingly crossed into territory that went beyond mere counterfeiting. He was now making claims about Jordan's personal standards and values. You see, I understand what Michael Jordan represents, the vendor continued, warming to his philosophical theme. He's about excellence, about never settling for second best. That's exactly what I'm offering you. Here today, excellence at a price that makes sense. The irony of using Jordan's own principles to sell counterfeit versions of his jersey was not lost on anyone who recognized the basketball legend. Yet Jordan's composure never wavered. He continued to watch and listen, his presence becoming more powerful with each passing moment. Let me tell you something about these jerseys that the official stores won't tell you, the vendor said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. They're made in the same factories, by the same people, with the same materials. The only difference is I'm cutting out the middleman. I'm doing this for the real fans who deserve to wear their hero's jersey. Jordan's eyes narrowed slightly at this claim. Throughout his career, he had always emphasized the importance of doing things the right way, of earning success through honest effort. The vendor's attempts to justify his counterfeit operation as some sort of public service struck at the heart of these values. You know what Michael Jordan always says? The vendor asked rhetorically, unaware that the man himself was about to answer. He says excellence is about dedication to your craft. Well, I'm dedicated to bringing you the highest quality jerseys at the best prices. That's my craft. The misappropriation of Jordan's words and philosophy to sell counterfeit merchandise was the final straw. The basketball legend had heard enough, but even as he prepared to make his presence known, his demeanor remained calm and controlled. This wouldn't be about anger or retribution. It would be about something far more important. "I can tell you with absolute certainty," the vendor declared, reaching the crescendo of his pitch, "that these jerseys are exactly what Michael Jordan would want his fans to have. They're perfect in every way. In fact, I challenge anyone to prove otherwise." The crowd's reaction to this bold statement was immediate but subtle. Those who had recognized Jordan exchanged knowing looks, while others leaned forward in anticipation. The vendor, interpreting this as interest in his product, smiled confidently. "You want to know how sure I am about these jerseys?" the vendor asked, holding up another counterfeit. "I'm so confident that I would put them up against any official jersey anywhere, anytime. Because when it comes to Michael Jordan merchandise, nobody knows better than me." It was at this precise moment that Jordan decided to step forward. The crowd naturally parted before him, creating a clear path to the vendor's table. The vendor, still focused on his potential customers, didn't immediately notice the shift in attention. He was about to learn a powerful lesson about making claims you can't back up. The tension in the air was electric as Jordan moved closer to the table. Those watching knew they were about to witness something extraordinary, not just a confrontation between a counterfeit vendor and a sports legend, but a moment that would become part of Chicago's street law for years to come. "These jerseys represent everything Michael Jordan stands for," the vendor declared, making his final, fateful claim. "Quality, excellence, and giving the fans what they deserve. So who's ready to own a piece of basketball history?" The question hung in the air for a moment, about to be answered in a way the vendor never could have anticipated. Michael Jordan was now just steps away from the table, ready to address these claims personally. The stage was set for an encounter that would prove that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected moments. The moment Michael Jordan stepped into the vendor's direct line of sight, time seemed to stand still. The vendor's practiced sales pitch died in his throat as his eyes met those of the basketball legend. The same eyes that had stared down countless opponents on the court now fixed upon him with an intensity that made his hands tremble slightly as he held the counterfeit jersey. "You seem to know a lot about my jerseys," Jordan said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had commanded teammates and intimidated opponents throughout his career. The vendor's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, the dawning realization of his situation. The crowd had grown larger now, forming a respectful circle around the scene. Phones were raised to capture the moment, but there was no pushing or shoving. Jordan's presence commanded the same order off the court as he did on it. The vendor, still gripping the fake jersey, opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Tell me more about how you know exactly what I like in my jerseys," Jordan continued, his tone remaining measured but carrying an edge that made the vendor's confident facade crumble completely. The basketball legend reached out and took one of the counterfeit jerseys from the table, examining it with the kind of scrutiny that had made him famous for attention to detail. The vendor's earlier bravado had evaporated entirely. Gone was the man who moments ago had claimed to know Michael Jordan's preferences better than anyone. In his place stood someone who looked like he wished the ground would open up and swallow him whole. But Jordan wasn't done with the lesson he intended to teach. "You mentioned something about quality," Jordan said, running his fingers along the stitching of the counterfeit jersey. "About excellence and never settling for second best." His words carried no anger, but rather a disappointment that seemed to cut deeper than any shouting could have. "Why don't you show me exactly what makes these jerseys so special?" The vendor's hands were visibly shaking now as he watched Jordan examine the merchandise. Each flaw, each imperfection that Jordan's trained eye caught felt like another nail in the coffin of his operation. The crowd watched in hushed anticipation, many recording what was quickly becoming a masterclass in handling confrontation. "You said something interesting earlier," Jordan continued, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering. "You said I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these and the real ones." He held up the counterfeit jersey, letting it catch the late afternoon light. "Want to test that theory?" The vendor's face had lost all color. His earlier claims about having inside connections to the factory and knowing Jordan's preferences now hung in the air like evidence of his own deception. But what happened next surprised everyone present, including the vendor himself. Jordan's expression softened slightly, not with weakness, but with a kind of understanding that came from his own experiences. "You know what the real difference is between these jerseys and the authentic ones?" he asked, his voice taking on a tone of genuine inquiry rather than accusation. "It's not just about the quality of the material or the stitching, it's about what they represent." The crowd leaned in, sensing that this was becoming more than just a confrontation over counterfeit merchandise. Jordan was turning this moment into something larger, something more meaningful. The vendor, despite his obvious discomfort, found himself unable to look away from the legend standing before him. "When someone buys a real jersey," Jordan continued, "they're not just getting a piece of cloth with my number on it. They're buying into a standard of excellence. They're supporting the team, the city, the game itself." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But more than that, they're making a choice to do things the right way." The vendor's defensive posture began to shift. Where moments ago he had been trying to shrink away from the situation, now he found himself actually listening. Jordan had managed to transform what could have been a moment of pure humiliation into something approaching a teaching opportunity. "I've spent my entire career pushing myself to be better," Jordan said, addressing not just the vendor but everyone gathered around. Every game, every practice, every moment on that court was about refusing to take shortcuts, about understanding that real excellence comes from doing things the right way, even when it's harder. The power of the moment was palpable. Here was Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time, not just shutting down a counterfeit operation, but trying to impart a genuine lesson about integrity and excellence. The vendor's expression had transformed from fear to something approaching shame, but not the destructive kind, rather the type that could lead to change. "You clearly have skills," Jordan observed, gesturing to the setup of the vendor's operation. "You've got business sense. You know how to connect with people. You understand what they want." He paused, letting these words of acknowledgement sink in before continuing. "But you're using those talents to deceive people, to sell them something that isn't real." The vendor's eyes dropped to his table of counterfeit merchandise, seeing it. Perhaps for the first time through different eyes, Jordan's words weren't just about fake jerseys anymore. They were about choices, about the path one chooses to take in life. "I could have security here in minutes," Jordan said, his voice remaining calm but firm. "Could have the police shut down your operation, confiscate everything." The vendor tensed at these words, but Jordan wasn't finished. "But that's not what this moment is about." The crowd watched in amazement as Jordan picked up another counterfeit jersey, examining it thoughtfully. "You know what I see when I look at these?" he asked, holding the jersey up. "I see wasted potential, not just in the fake products, but in you." This unexpected turn in the conversation caught everyone off guard, especially the vendor. He had been prepared for anger, for punishment, for public humiliation. What he hadn't been prepared for was Michael Jordan seeing potential in him, even in this moment of being caught red-handed. "Success isn't about finding shortcuts," Jordan continued, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had earned every accolade through hard work and dedication. It's about putting in the work, about respecting yourself and others enough to do things the right way. The vendor's posture had changed completely now. Gone was the defensive slouch, replaced by something approaching attention. Jordan's words were reaching him in a way that no amount of threatening or punishment could have achieved. "Every time I step onto that court," Jordan said, gesturing toward the United Center looming in the background, "I carry the responsibility of representing something bigger than myself. Every jersey sold with my number on it should represent those same values." The crowd had grown even larger, but the silence remained respectful. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something special, not just a confrontation between a sports legend and a counterfeit vendor, but a moment of genuine teaching and potential transformation. "So here's what's going to happen," Jordan said, his voice taking on a tone of finality. "You're going to pack up these fake jerseys, and you're going to make a choice. You can either continue down this path, always looking over your shoulder, always knowing you're selling people lies." He paused, making sure his next words would have maximum impact. "Or you can choose to be better." The vendor's hands had stopped shaking. He was standing straighter now, looking Jordan in the eye for the first time since the conversation began. The transformation in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. Something in Jordan's words had reached him on a fundamental level. "I've spent my life proving that excellence isn't about taking the easy way," Jordan continued. "It's about pushing yourself to be better, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." He gestured to the table of counterfeit merchandise. "This isn't you at your best. You're capable of more than this." The crowd watched as the vendor slowly began to nod, understanding dawning in his eyes. This wasn't just about getting caught anymore. It was about recognizing a moment of potential change, about seeing a different path forward. "The choice is yours," Jordan said, his voice carrying both authority and opportunity. "But remember this moment. Remember that Michael Jordan didn't just catch you selling fake jerseys. He saw something in you worth saving." The tension in the air had transformed into something else entirely. What had started as a confrontation had become a moment of potential redemption, a chance for someone to choose a better path. The vendor looked at his table of counterfeit merchandise, then back at Jordan, and in that moment, everyone present could see a decision being made. The crowd held its collective breath as the moment of truth arrived. Michael Jordan reached into his suit jacket, and the vendor instinctively tensed, perhaps expecting the worst. Instead, Jordan pulled out something that made everyone present lean forward in surprise. His business card. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" Jordan asked, holding the card, but not yet extending it. "When I started, I didn't have much either. But I made a choice early on. Every move I made, every shot I took, every decision I faced, I chose the path of integrity. Not because it was easy, but because it was right." The vendor's eyes fixed on the card in Jordan's hand. Understanding slowly dawning on his face. This wasn't just about shutting down his operation anymore. This was about something much bigger. Jordan was offering him more than just a way out. He was offering him a way up. "I've been watching you work," Jordan continued, his voice carrying that same quiet authority that had commanded respect throughout his career. "You've got hustle, you've got drive, you know how to connect with people. These are valuable skills." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But right now you're using them to sell lies." A murmur went through the crowd as Jordan held up one of the counterfeit jerseys. "Look at this," he said, not just to the vendor but to everyone gathered around. "The stitching is decent. The design is close. You clearly put effort into making these look authentic, but imagine putting that same effort into something real, something legitimate." The vendor's expression had transformed from fear to something approaching hope, though tinged with uncertainty. Jordan noticed this shift and pressed forward, knowing this was the crucial moment where real change could happen. "Tomorrow morning," Jordan said, finally extending the business card. "You're going to call this number. You're going to speak to someone from my team, and you're going to learn what it means to be part of something authentic." The card seemed to gleam in the late afternoon sun, a small rectangle of possibility hovering between them. The crowd watched in amazed silence as the vendor slowly reached out to take the card, his hand trembling slightly. But before his fingers could close around it, Jordan pulled it back slightly. "But first," he said, his voice firm but not unkind, "I want you to do something." Without hesitation, the vendor nodded, ready to comply with whatever Jordan asked. The basketball legend gestured to the table full of counterfeit merchandise. "Pack it all up," he said, "every last piece, and then I want you to tell these people the truth." The vendor swallowed hard, looking at the crowd that had gathered around his table. For a moment, it seemed like he might refuse, might try to hold onto his last shred of pride, but something in Jordan's steady gaze gave him courage. "These jerseys," the vendor began, his voice shaky at first but growing stronger. "They're not real. They're not official. They're not what I said they were." The admission seemed to physically pain him, but with each word, his shoulders straightened a little more. "I've been lying to you all, and I'm sorry." Jordan nodded approvingly, but he wasn't done yet. "Now tell them why you did it," he prompted, his voice gentle but insistent. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about understanding and growth. The vendor took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a different kind of truth. "I did it because I thought it was the only way," he admitted. "I saw how much people wanted these jerseys, how much they wanted to feel connected to the game, to you," he gestured to Jordan, "but couldn't afford the real ones. I told myself I was helping them, but really, I was just helping myself." A profound silence fell over the gathering. This wasn't just a confession. It was a moment of genuine transformation happening right before their eyes. Jordan's expression softened further, recognizing the courage it took to admit these truths publicly. "That's the first step," Jordan said, finally extending the business card again. "Being honest with yourself and with others. Now comes the hard part, being better." This time, when the vendor reached for the card, Jordan let him take it. But the basketball legend wasn't finished with his lesson. He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying across the gathered onlookers with the same authority that had commanded countless huddles during crucial game moments. "Everyone here today," Jordan began, "you're not just witnessing someone getting caught, you're witnessing someone getting a second chance. Because that's what excellence is really about, not never falling, but always getting back up." The yes crowd murmured in agreement, many nodding as Jordan's words resonated with their own experiences of failure and redemption. The vendor stood straighter now, Jordan's business card clutched carefully in his hand like a lifeline to a better future. "Tomorrow morning," Jordan continued, now addressing both the vendor and the crowd, "this man has a choice to make. He can throw that card away, go back to selling fakes, always looking over his shoulder, always knowing he's not living up to his potential." He paused, letting the weight of these words settle. "Or he can make the call, take the harder path, and start building something real." The vendor looked down at the card in his hand, then back at Jordan. "I'll make the call," he said, his voice firm for the first time since Jordan had approached his table. "First thing tomorrow morning." Jordan's response was immediate and powerful. "No," he said, pulling out his phone. "You're going to make it right now." The crowd stirred with excitement as Jordan dialed a number, put the phone on speaker, and held it out. "Mr. Jordan," a professional voice answered after 2 rings. "How can I help you?" "Lisa," Jordan replied, his eyes never leaving the vendor's face. I'm standing here with someone who's going to need our help turning his life around. I want you to set up a meeting for first thing tomorrow morning. Full team." The vendor's eyes widened as he realized this was really happening. This wasn't just about avoiding punishment. This was about genuine opportunity. The crowd watched in amazed silence as Jordan continued his conversation, making real-time arrangements for the vendor's fresh start. "Yes, sir," Lisa responded, efficiently. "What should we prepare for?" Jordan smiled slightly, still watching the vendor's reaction. "Prepare for someone with raw talent who needs to learn how to use it the right way. Someone who's ready to understand what it really means to be part of our organization." The vendor's transformation was visible to everyone present. The man who had been selling counterfeit jerseys just minutes ago now stood straight and proud, understanding the magnitude of the opportunity being offered to him. "And Lisa," Jordan added, "make sure everyone understands this isn't just about giving someone a job. This is about teaching someone our values, about showing them what it means to do things the right way." The crowd had grown even larger. Now, word spreading quickly through the streets around the United Center that something extraordinary was happening. But despite the numbers, a respectful silence maintained, everyone understanding they were witnessing something special. "One more thing," Jordan said, both to Lisa on the phone and to the vendor standing before him. "We're going to need a proper suit for tomorrow's meeting." He paused, looking at the vendor's current attire. Something that represents who he's going to become, not who he's been. The vendor's eyes glistened with unshed tears as the full impact of this moment hit him. This wasn't just about avoiding trouble. This was about transformation, about second chances, about someone seeing potential in him that he hadn't even seen in himself. As Jordan ended the call, he turned back to the vendor with one final piece of wisdom. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "you're going to walk into our offices and you're going to face a choice. You can either be the person who used to sell fake jerseys on the street, or you can be the person who was brave enough to change when given the chance. The person who understood that real success isn't about taking shortcuts. It's about doing things the right way, even when it's harder." The vendor nodded, understanding deep in his bones that this was more than just a job opportunity. This was a chance to rewrite his entire story. As he began packing up his counterfeit merchandise, not with shame, but with purpose, the crowd witnessed the power of redemption in real time. Jordan watched approvingly as the vendor carefully folded each fake jersey, no longer seeing them as merchandise, but as reminders of a path he was choosing to leave behind. This wasn't just about confiscating counterfeit goods. It was about showing someone a better way forward. The atmosphere around the vendor's table had transformed completely. What had started as a confrontation had become a moment of inspiration, a living lesson in the power of second chances and the importance of choosing integrity over easy profit. As the vendor carefully packed away the last of his counterfeit merchandise, Michael Jordan's presence continued to command the scene. The basketball legend wasn't just watching. He was ensuring that this moment would leave a lasting impact not only on the vendor, but on everyone present. "You know," Jordan said, addressing the crowd that had gathered, "throughout my career, people have asked me what makes a champion. They want to know about the game-winning shots, the championships, the medals." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the attentive faces. "But what they don't always understand is that those moments aren't what define you. It's the choices you make when nobody's watching, or when everybody is." The vendor, who had just finished packing his table, stood quietly, absorbing every word. The transformation in his demeanor was remarkable. Gone was the nervous energy of a man caught in wrongdoing, replaced by the attentive focus of someone who understood they were being given a rare opportunity for redemption. "Today," Jordan continued, "we all witnessed something important. Not just someone getting caught selling fake merchandise, but someone choosing to be better when given the chance. He turned to the vendor. That choice, that moment of truth, when you decided to admit what you were doing and accept the opportunity to change, that's what character is about. A young boy in the crowd, wearing a genuine Bulls jersey, raised his hand hesitantly. Jordan, ever mindful of his impact on young fans, nodded encouragingly. "Mr. Jordan," the boy asked, "why didn't you just call the police?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and Jordan smiled, recognizing the perfect teaching opportunity. "Because sometimes," he answered, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd, "the best way to stop something wrong isn't to punish someone. It's to show them a better way." The vendor's eyes met Jordan's at these words, understanding and gratitude evident in his expression. Jordan continued, "When I was coming up in the game, I had coaches, mentors, people who saw potential in me even when I made mistakes. They didn't just tell me what I was doing wrong, they showed me how to do it right." Jordan picked up one of the packed boxes of counterfeit jerseys. "These jerseys," he said, holding the box, "they represent more than just fake merchandise. They represent the shortcuts we're sometimes tempted to take, the easy paths that lead us away from who we could really be." The crowd listened intently as Jordan set the box down and turned back to the vendor. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "when you walk into our offices, you're not going to be walking in as someone who got caught. You're going to walk in as someone who made a choice to be better." A woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice curious but respectful. "What kind of job are you offering him?" The question seemed to interest everyone present, including the vendor himself, who looked at Jordan expectantly. Jordan's response was measured and thoughtful. "We're not just offering him a job," he explained. "We're offering him a chance to understand what it means to be part of something authentic, to learn how real business is done, how legitimate success is achieved." He turned to the vendor. "You've got skills in sales, in understanding what people want, in making connections. Now you're going to learn how to use those skills the right way." The vendor nodded, standing a little straighter. "I won't let you down, Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice firm with newfound determination. "No," Jordan replied, "you won't let yourself down. That's more important." He addressed the crowd again. "Success isn't just about making money or getting ahead. It's about being able to look in the mirror and respect the person looking back at you." A police officer who had been drawn to the commotion approached the scene, but Jordan held up a hand in a calm gesture. "Officer," he said, "everything's being handled. In fact, you're just in time to witness something important." He turned to the vendor. "Show him what you're going to do with all this merchandise." The vendor didn't hesitate. He turned to the officer and spoke clearly. "Sir, these are counterfeit jerseys. I was selling them illegally, but I'm done with that now. They need to be confiscated and destroyed properly." The officer looked surprised, glancing between Jordan and the vendor. Jordan nodded approvingly. "That's what integrity looks like," he said, "making the right choice, even when it costs you something." As the officer began processing the counterfeit merchandise, Jordan addressed the crowd one more time. "Everyone here today is part of something special. You're not just watching someone get caught and punished, you're watching someone choose to change their life." A teenager in the crowd called out, "But what if he goes back to selling fakes tomorrow?" The question wasn't asked with malice, but with genuine curiosity about the power of second chances. Jordan's response was immediate and powerful. "That's the thing about choices," he said. "We make them every day, every moment." Tomorrow he could choose to go back to his old ways, but tomorrow I'm choosing to give him a chance to be better, and he's choosing to take that chance. He looked at the vendor. "Aren't you?" The vendor's response was firm and clear. "Yes, sir. More than anything." Jordan nodded, satisfied. You see, everyone talks about my buzzer beaters, my championships, my career highlights, but the real victories, they happen in moments like this, moments where someone chooses to be better, to do better, even when they could have taken the easy way out. A businesswoman in the crowd, wearing a bull's pin on her blazer, spoke up. "Mr. Jordan, what made you decide to handle it this way, to offer him a job instead of pressing charges?" Jordan considered the question carefully before responding. In basketball, when a player makes a mistake, you have two choices. You can bench them, punish them, make them feel worse about the error. Or you can show them the right way to play, help them learn from the mistake, make them better. He gestured to the vendor. Life's no different. Sometimes the best defense is giving someone a chance to play offense the right way. The vendor, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. "Can I say something?" When Jordan nodded, he turned to address the crowd. "All this time I thought I was being smart, making money the easy way. But standing here now, I realize I was just scared. Scared to try the honest way, scared to fail, scared to admit I could be better than this." Jordan put a hand on the vendor's shoulder. "That's the most important part of all this," he said. "Understanding that success isn't about never being scared. It's about not letting that fear stop you from doing what's right." As the officer finished documenting the counterfeit merchandise, Jordan checked his watch. "It's almost game time," he said, then turned to the vendor. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Wear something professional. Even if you have to borrow it, this is your shot. Make it count." The vendor stood tall, emotion evident in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Not just for the opportunity, but for showing me there's a better way." Jordan's final words to the crowd carried the weight of his entire career's wisdom. Success isn't just about winning. It's about winning the right way. It's about making choices you can be proud of, about building something real, something that lasts. As the crowd began to disperse, many staying to shake Jordan's hand or get an autograph, the vendor carefully tucked the business card into his wallet. This simple piece of paper represented more than just a job opportunity. It represented a complete transformation, a chance to rewrite his story. The officer, finishing his report, approached Jordan one last time. "Mr. Jordan, are you sure about this? About giving him this chance?" Jordan's response summed up everything about his character, about his understanding of leadership and redemption. "Officer, in basketball and in life, the greatest players aren't just the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who learn from them, who choose to be better when given the chance. Today, we're not just stopping someone from selling fake jerseys. We're giving someone the opportunity to become authentic themselves." As the sun began to set over Chicago, casting long shadows across the street where this remarkable scene had unfolded, the vendor took one last look at his old table, now empty of its counterfeit merchandise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and a chance to prove that sometimes the greatest victories happen far from any basketball court. 1 year later, the same street corner near the United Center looked very different. Where once a table of counterfeit jerseys had stood, there was now a legitimate merchandise kiosk, properly licensed and professionally operated. Behind the counter stood a familiar face, the former vendor, now dressed in a crisp Bulls-branded polo shirt, helping a young fan find the perfect jersey. This transformation wasn't just about one person's journey from selling fakes to running a legitimate business. It was about the ripple effects that one moment of grace, one opportunity for redemption, could create in a community. The story of Michael Jordan's encounter with the counterfeit vendor had spread throughout Chicago, becoming a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest victories happen when someone chooses to be better. But this story isn't just about what happened on that autumn day in Chicago. It's about something much bigger, something that speaks to all of us, no matter where we are or what challenges we face. It's about the choices we make when confronted with our own shortcomings and the power we have to change our path when given the opportunity. Think about it. How many times have you stood at a crossroads in your own life? Maybe you weren't selling counterfeit jerseys, but perhaps you faced that moment where the easy path and the right path diverged. Maybe you're standing at that crossroads right now, wondering which way to turn. The vendor's story teaches us something profound about second chances. But more than that, it shows us that true greatness isn't just about achieving success. It's about how we achieve it. When Michael Jordan approached that table of counterfeit jerseys, he could have chosen the path of punishment. Instead, he chose the path of transformation. This is where you, our viewers, come in. Every day, each of us has the power to be either the person who needs a second chance or the person who gives one. Sometimes we might even be both. The question is, what will we do with that power? Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever been given a second chance that changed everything? Or have you been in a position to offer someone else that opportunity for redemption? These moments, these choices, they're what define us, not just as individuals, but as a community. The former vendor now speaks at local schools and community centers, sharing his story with young people who might be tempted by quick money and easy shortcuts. He tells them about that day when Michael Jordan didn't just catch him doing something wrong. He showed him how to do something right. The hardest part, he often tells his audience, wasn't getting caught. The hardest part was accepting that I could be better than my mistakes, that I didn't have to be defined by my worst choices. His words resonate with young people because they speak to a universal truth. We all need someone to believe in us, especially when we've lost belief in ourselves. But this story doesn't end with one vendor's transformation. It continues with every person who hears this tale and faces their own moment of truth. Maybe you're watching this video right now, wrestling with a decision between what's easy and what's right. Maybe you know someone who needs that same kind of second chance that changed this vendor's life. The power of this story lies not just in what happened that day near the United Center, but in what continues to happen every time someone chooses integrity over convenience, authenticity over shortcuts. It's about the courage to admit when we're wrong and the strength to start again. Jordan's approach that day showed us something crucial about leadership and redemption. He demonstrated that true leadership isn't just about catching people doing wrong. It's about showing them how to do right. It's about understanding that sometimes the person selling fake jerseys on the street corner isn't a criminal who needs punishment, but a person who needs guidance. Consider this. What would our communities look like if we all approached mistakes and missteps the way Jordan did that day? What if, instead of just pointing out what's wrong, we invested in showing people what's right? What if we saw potential where others see only problems? The ripple effects of that one encounter continue to spread. The vendor's legitimate business now employs other people looking for second chances. He's created a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, teaching them about business ethics and the value of doing things the right way from the start. But perhaps the most powerful part of this story is how it challenges us to think about our own roles in creating change. It's easy to watch this video and admire Michael Jordan's wisdom or appreciate the vendor's transformation. The harder part is asking ourselves, what would we do in either of their shoes? This is where we want to hear from you, our viewers. We want to know your stories of second chances, whether you were the one who received one or the one who gave one. What moments in your life have defined your journey toward doing things the right way? Share your stories in the comments below. Tell us about a time when someone believed in you when they had every reason not to. Tell us about when you chose the harder right over the easier wrong. Your stories matter because they show others that transformation is possible, that second chances can lead to first-place finishes. And while you're sharing your stories, think about this. Who in your life right now might need the kind of chance that Michael Jordan gave that vendor? Who might be waiting for someone to see their potential even when they're not living up to it yet? Remember, this story isn't just about Michael Jordan or a vendor selling fake jerseys. It's about all of us, about the choices we make, the chances we take, and the opportunities we have to help others find their way to something better. Before you move on from this video, ask yourself these questions. What's your counterfeit jersey? What's the thing in your life that you know isn't authentic, that isn't living up to your true potential? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it? Maybe you're in a situation right now where you're taking shortcuts, where you're choosing the easy path over the right one. Or maybe you know someone who is. This is your moment to make a different choice, to be the person who steps up and chooses authenticity over convenience. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power we all have to make a difference. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads, where we continue to bring you stories that inspire change and challenge us to be better. And for those of you who've stayed with us until the end, here's one final thought. Every day, we have the opportunity to be either Michael Jordan or the vendor in this story. We can be the person who offers a second chance or the person brave enough to take one. Which will you choose to be today? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Tag a friend who's given you a second chance or someone who might need one. Let's create a community where transformation isn't just possible, it's expected. Remember, just like that vendor discovered, it's never too late to start doing things the right way. Your past mistakes don't have to define your future success. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you, or you believing in yourself, to start a transformation that can change everything. The story of the vendor and Michael Jordan didn't end that day on the street corner. It continues every time someone watches this video and decides to make a change. It lives on in every second chance given and taken, in every choice to do things the right way, even when no one is watching. So we'll leave you with this question. What's your next move going to be? Because just like in basketball, in life, it's not about the mistakes you've made, it's about what you do next. The game isn't over until you decide it is. Drop your in the comments if this story touched you, and let us know what changes you're planning to make in your life. Remember, every great comeback story starts with a single decision to be better. This is more than just a story about fake jerseys and second chances. It's a reminder that within each of us lies the power to change our path, to choose integrity over convenience, to be authentic in a world full of counterfeits. The only question is, are you ready to make that choice? We'll see you in the comment section below. Until next time, remember, in the game of life, just like in basketball, it's not about never falling. It's about how you get back up, and more importantly, who you help up along the way.